This episode of Where Did the Road Go is brought to you in part by our Patreons. If you want to become a patron, go to wheredidtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this Fringe News edition of Where Did the Road Go? I'm here with Mr. Joshua Cutchin.
For the first time in a long time.
Well, except for last couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's true. But for the first time
Fringe
for a
news.
roundtable sort of format. Yeah, exactly.
And we also have Ren Collier.
Hey, everyone.
And we were going to have Red Pill, but apparently where he is, he does not have power at the moment. He said it's been raining really bad and his lights are out.
That's rotten. I hope that he stays safe. He's one of the good guys. So
And, you know, hopefully by raining hard, he doesn't mean like what I had a week or so ago.
Oh geez, yeah.
You know, yet I didn't lose lights, even though my power boxes were underwater.
Yeah, that's insane. That's I'm so are you more or less back on your feet? Or getting there?
Getting there. Still cleaning, still fixing things.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine how much of a task that must have been. Just I mean, I can't put it into perspective. I'm just glad that your office looks like it was pretty okay.
Yeah. Most of the stuff in the store was okay. The house itself was okay. It's the basements got destroyed. And apparently it damaged a bunch of stuff on my car, even though I moved it.
Mm-hmm.
So, because it got water in it, and water got into the starter, and it worked for about a week, and then it quit. And apparently there's a connector for my stereo underneath the rug that goes into the amp in the trunk, which I didn't even know was there. And when that gets wet, it stops working. So that died about 2 days after the flood. So it's like these constant little, oh, and there's that.
Is Mars still in retrograde? I can't remember. Mercury just came out, so it should be a little bit better.
But on the upside, I have amazing listeners on this show and co-hosts who have helped out greatly. You two included.
Well, thanks. Yeah, well, it's easy to, especially when compared to other people who constantly beg for money. A little insider baseball there. It's easy to see when people really need it, and I think that you were one of those people that needed it. So the Where Did the Road Go crew stepped it up, and thanks to everybody who helped out Soraya. It was a rotten state that he was in.
Yeah, and
is still in.
It's not as bad as some of the videos I've seen of this area. Downhill, because I'm at the top of the hill. You know, I'm at one of the higher points in between Cayuga and Seneca Lake. It was all rain. It wasn't water coming down from like up higher. It was all rain just hitting right here for a long period of time, very heavily. And then that all washed downhill. And there are entire houses that are gone, and that type of stuff doesn't happen in this area. There's no one has flood insurance because this area doesn't really flood. You know, there's the occasional flash flood that overruns a road or something, but you generally, people's houses don't disappear into the lake.
Yeah, that's some of the pictures that you posted and some of the other stuff that I saw from people in that area are just absolutely insane.
And again, it was all rain. It was just an unbelievably heavy rain that just circled over us.
Yeah, it's wild. It's just maybe it was HAARP.
Maybe. It was a weird weather pattern because it came from the south, went straight north over to Lake Ontario, turned around, came back south, and just swirled over our area with my house almost in the middle of it, before moving off to the west. And that's not how weather patterns go around here. I mean, we're in upstate New York, so our weather generally comes from the west and occasionally up from the coast, in which case it comes up, but it doesn't turn around and come back down and then go against the jet stream, you know?
Yeah, it's HAARP trying to silence Where Did the Road Go. That's all it is. It's got to be that.
It explains
And they
everything.
failed. They failed.
Well, they knocked the Metallic Onslaught out of business for a week.
Oh, jeez. Well, yeah, but Where the Road Go kept on plugging along, so
That's true. Although we've only been doing one show a week, where we had about 2 on a regular basis, just because I've been so overwhelmed. And again, I want to thank everyone who has helped out. And also, I may have to remove Strange Familiars from the YouTube channel, because YouTube is being very difficult. They have demonetized us right as the flooding happened, so that was helpful. And they've demonetized us for duplication, which basically means that you're uploading stuff you don't have permission for. Well, I have permission for everything that's on the Where Did the Road Go channel, but they're not giving me any option to prove it to them. The best I can guess is they're seeing the Strange Familiar stuff, because they also turned down Tim's attempt. Tim tried to monetize his channel finally, and they turned him down for unoriginal content, even though everything on there is his. So I don't know what's going on with YouTube. I don't think it's any kind of grand conspiracy. I think it's them trying to fine-tune things to avoid issues and overdoing it again. So I may have to drop Strange Familiars from the YouTube channel, but you can subscribe to Tim's YouTube channel for Strange Familiars, and it'll still be on the RSS feed and stuff for anyone who doesn't, listen to it on YouTube.
Yeah, and that actually might be good for Tim's show in the long run anyway, just to be able to have all of his listeners in one place.
Yeah, yeah. At least as far as YouTube goes. But, they don't even let you try to remonetize it for 30 days. They basically tell you fix the problem and then try to remonetize in 30 days, but they won't tell me what the problem was. And I'm not outside any of their rules and guidelines.
Oh, that's got to be super annoying.
So it's kind of like, you've done something wrong, fix it. It's like, well, I'm not aware of anything I've done wrong. Well, we can't tell you what it is. Thanks.
Yeah, it's super helpful.
and I've heard that other, paranormal channels have been demonetized, but again, I don't know that it's necessarily a conspiracy thing. I think it's them overstepping, trying to fix things before they become bigger problems, like copyright issues and things like that.
Yeah, right. If there's any kind of conspiracy, it's just them getting pressure from their ad companies who run ads on YouTube and stuff and Google, where they don't want their content associated with what the public might consider fringe or whatever.
Yeah, and I from what I understand, you can kind of cater what type of things you want your content to go to. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't know. We'll see what the future holds. I wish there were just other alternatives. I mean, there's video channels like Vimeo, but Vimeo gets, a handful of views. Vimeo's a great platform. It's just no one uses it. And I've been sent movies on Vimeo. Like people who are working movies and stuff will send me links on Vimeo. And Vimeo looks great and it sounds great, but you have to pay for it if you're going to upload content, and you still have limitations. And it just got to the point where I'm like, I don't think I'm going to keep my Vimeo channel anymore, because it's not really doing anything for me. And I've had it for years, but everyone just goes to YouTube.
Well, there is DTube.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
But again, it's one of those things where it's like it only has a fraction of the user base that something like YouTube has.
Yeah. Well, I guess we will see if any competition pops up. I mean, them kicking Alex Jones off, is likely to cause a exodus somewhere. It's just a matter of if it's going to be anywhere good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying not to get, I'm trying not to get political now, but it will be. I don't even know if the climate is such that I don't know how many people would follow him over, if that makes any sense. I can see a lot of people wanting to continue to distance themselves and be like, well, YouTube's still the safe spot where it's at. So, yeah.
All right, let's get to some interesting news articles. And I think this first one, Ren, you posted, could multiple personality disorder explain life, the universe, and everything?
I didn't post that one, but I
You
did read it.
Okay.
That's probably one Shirley posted, but
Probably.
it's a cool article. I was just reading this before the show, and I think the basic idea in here is that, like, it's basically about panpsychism,
Yeah.
and classic idealism, but basically the idea that materialism can't necessarily explain like where things like emotions, or like the feeling of like the article says, what it's like to feel the warmth of a fire, or the redness of an apple, or the bitterness of disappointment. That material and physicalism can't really fundamentally explain everything about that. And that, is kind of the hard problem of consciousness. But that under constitutive panpsychism, like basically matter has its own consciousness and has experience, and like basically every subatomic particle in your body has some sort of consciousness involved. And I know some people have problems with panpsychism as well. I mean, because it completely not negates, but it ignores the existence of like spirits in an animist worldview,
Right.
which I think is also a good solve for things like dissociative identity disorder and the hard problem of consciousness as well. Is that that there are things that are called spirits, and that they exist in sort of a spirit world that overlaps with us, and that things are inspirited.
Well, one of the interesting things that this article starts with, and I've heard other people, and I can't remember who, talk about how there's no that they're saying like dissociative identity disorder doesn't really exist. And I knew someone who had it, and it was pretty damn scary, to be quite honest. And what they did here in Germany in 2015 is they did brain scans, and it says like this woman exhibited a variety of dissociated personalities or alters, some of which claimed to be blind. Using EEGs, the doctors were able to ascertain that the brain activity normally associated with sight wasn't present while a blind alter was in control of the woman's body, even though her eyes were open. Remarkably, when a sighted alter assumed control, the usual brain activity returned. So at that point, you're saying there's something very distinct going on here. And I remember Michael Talbot in the Holographic Universe talking about people shifting personalities and their eye color changing. So right off the bat, that's a really interesting mind over matter type of thing. These are things that shouldn't be happening. And the other thing I found interesting is when they're talking about the panpsychism and like every subatomic particle having consciousness. It reminds me of what Seth said, which was that below the level of the subatomic particle were consciousness units. And that's what actually put together consciousness, that it was something we hadn't actually gotten down to yet.
Yeah, I think my takeaway from this, well, number one, the eye thing is really interesting, especially with some of the stuff that Ren has talked about in the past, and possibly the importance of that, and but I also think it's interesting if you look at these. There are some stories that I've run into of people whose eyes actually change color when they're under some sort of sense of possession as well, which you could say is sort of a variation on the multiple personality disorder. But
yeah, it could be.
My biggest takeaway from this article is this is going to be the first of a lot of this backdooring of non-physicalist ideas through materialist means. In other words, let's do everything that we can to bring in these other ideas like idealism, without actually having to let go of our materialist framework. And I think it's gonna keep on happening for a long time until the system finally breaks.
Yeah, the blindness thing I thought was interesting. I'm trying to remember the name of the actual disorder, but apparently maybe it's in the new DSM. It's called conversion disorder. But it's interesting. I know I've talked before about people who would have a mental disorder that they would believe that they were blind, right? Even though they could see. Like there's nothing wrong with their eyes or their neural system or optical system or anything, but they still just said they couldn't see, and they really can't see. Like they'll stumble into things. But I've never heard of it manifesting in an alternate personality. Like that's fascinating, because it again goes to show you that, I mean, just looking at the mechanical structure of the brain can explain how we perceive the world.
Yeah.
You know, like we're not just organic robots, and we're, you know, there's more to us and every living thing than just chemistry. Yeah, and it was incredible. I've never heard about the eye color changing. That's really fascinating. I mean, that makes sense to me, because I feel like in symptoms of possession or something riding someone, yeah, you probably could see physical changes, or there could be physical changes made to them because of that. I think also too, one thing the article was going for is this sort of, and I may be saying this incorrectly, but I think it's like a Neoplatonic thing, where the idea is that there is, you know, one sort of great consciousness, and the universe is just a bunch of fragments of that consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much I fall on that side of the boat, because I don't know. Maybe it's just I don't like that idea. But I don't have a fantastic argument for why that isn't the case. But again, it's interesting to see something like this in Scientific American. I think the sea change away from materialism, even if it's something as crude as I think idealism is, it's still fascinating to see this in like a respected scientific publication, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's a step in the right direction.
It definitely is, yeah.
Baby steps.
Yeah. And it's a nice tangible thing to point to in terms of the way that the tide's turning.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the idea that we're all basically dissociated from a master consciousness or a cosmic consciousness. I mean, it's an interesting idea.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that, you know, I guess that would mean we're kind of collecting experience for something else that we're all a part of and don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, on some level, I think it takes away from the agency of individuals and and stuff. So I don't know, maybe that's just why it puts a bad taste in my mouth. I mean, I definitely agree with the fact that, yeah, materialism isn't the answer, but, you know, I fall more on the animist side of things, that, you know, but then again, I don't know, things do have memories. Like, are you guys familiar with like psychometry?
Yeah. The idea of picking up information from objects.
Yeah, yes. That even things like, you know, a tool that someone used for 20 years contains the experience of that tool being used.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, I've always thought that was a very romantic idea.
And if that's the case, how is that information transmitted?
Exactly, yeah. Or where is it stored, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked, I know you and Misarai have talked too about, you know, memories, like where are memories stored? Because no one really knows.
Yeah. Well, you know, science knows. They're just not, you know, they just can't prove anything, or,
yeah,
you know, whatever. And then they change the subject.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're all stored in the brain. We just haven't figured out how yet.
Yeah, exactly. We know they're in there somewhere.
This is really interesting to me, and something I've been thinking about a lot is that if in skeptical communities, the idea that something is mysterious is referred to as a God of the gaps fallacy. So in other words, the idea that because we can't explain something, it implies some sort of supernatural or spiritual intervention is considered a fallacy amongst skeptical quarters. But the more I think about that, can't you just flip it on its head and say that, you know, as Rupert Sheldrake once put it, we're constantly dealt the empty promissory note of materialism over and over again? I mean, isn't there, if there's a God of the gaps, isn't there a science of the gaps too? Or, you know, a materialism of the gaps, I guess, would probably be a more accurate way to put it.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
This idea that, you know, the supernaturally inclined or woo inclined, as much as I hate that word, will say, well, it must be something must be something, mysterious or supernatural that's causing this to happen. Well, the skeptically inclined will do that exact same thing with materials explanation.
Well,
I see what you're saying.
If you see what I mean.
Yeah. I think the assumption there, though, is made that there is no evidence for anything supernatural or paranormal, and I mean that's patently false. There is experimental evidence for it. Yeah. So it's like, it's just as good as an answer as anything else because there's evidence for it, and if there's evidence for it, then there's no fallacy there. It's a possibility. Yeah. So
well put. Well put.
All right, let's then move on to something that I don't know. This article kind of bugged me. It's the one about Bigfoot. We had two about Bigfoot. One's kind of ridiculous, but the other one was in, if I can find it here, in the Smithsonian.
Oh man, this article.
Why so many people still believe in Bigfoot? Now, I mean, the Smithsonian's kind of a bit of a skeptical sort of push on any of this stuff anyway. But the secondary headline says the appeal of the giant wild man, despite all evidence pointing to his mere existence being a hoax, holds strong. And it basically
what evidence?
Yeah, exactly. Well, because they cite that the 1958 footprints. The tracks were planted near Bluff Creek, North California, by a man named Ray Wallace, but his prank was not revealed until his death in 2002 when his children had said it was just a joke. And that's not really evidence it was a prank necessarily. The guy's not here to say one way or the other, and of course they bring up the Patterson-Gimlin film, saying that also was a staged hoax. And skeptics say the animal was a man in a costume, while believers argue the creature's movements and body proportions could not possibly have been human. How is it that evidence has not gotten any better despite the exponential increase in the quantity and quality of cameras? Benjamin Radford, a research fellow with the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, said. And of course, they act like this was something that came out of 1958 and then vaguely mention, oh, yeah, there were some myths, too, in the Native Americans.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like Bigfoot just emerged like, from Zeus's head, like Athena in 1958, It's...
Well, yeah, and no one saw anything anomalous in the sky until Kenneth Arnold, guys. I mean, get with the program.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, the article, it's like I can answer the article in the headline. Why do so many people still want to believe in Bigfoot? I don't know. Maybe the thousands of eyewitnesses every single year that come forward with stories about seeing Bigfoot. I mean, like,
yeah.
and I mean, and I'm not saying what it is, but the exceptional amount of physical evidence. Mm-hmm. Is just it really is staggering. I mean, the book that I always point people to is Jeff Meldren's Sasquatch Legend Meets Science, because there is some very sophisticated discussion of primate foot anatomy and kinesiology that is just absolutely staggering. And there are some things that imply that if it is a hoax, it is perpetrated by some absolute consummate professionals with some really sophisticated equipment. Mm-hmm. And
right, and who's going to do that? I mean, really?
And the things that Meldrum points out, like one of my favorite ones is the mid-tarsal break, which is actually in some primates the actual center of the foot is flexible, and that leaves a distinctive pattern when moving. And you see this in Sasquatch prints. You wouldn't see this with a pair of fake wooden shoes. You wouldn't see it if somebody was just trying to make a giant human print. This is a very specific hybridization of ape and human footprint. That's one thing. The dermal ridges that they find, which are basically like the whorls on your fingerprints, they find those on the toe prints as well. There have been several famous casts that seem to depict foot injuries that would have to have been designed by a podiatrist. I mean, it's staggering to say that all that means nothing. It's just the hair samples, whatever. There are some that I think are really compelling because they've come back unknown primate, in a lab that should have the entire suite of different primate DNA on sample. But the footprints, the casts, are some of the most compelling things, and that is physical evidence, and that is something that, you know, you don't get too often in spirit phenomena or UFO phenomena or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's also the fact that this creature exists in legends of native people all around the world. And
100%. Yep.
why would that be the case unless they're actually relating to something somewhere along the line that is a common experience?
You don't even have to go back that far. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt was told a story about a guy running into like a wild man. I mean, these stories go back. I mean, credible accounts. You know, as in the 1800s, early 1900s. I mean, you know, our very own Timothy Renner has documented a ton of these. I mean, people are seeing something, and they've been seeing something for a long time, and they continue to see something. I mean, that's why people still believe in it.
And they,
well, and if memory, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say they just weren't called Bigfoot at the time.
Yeah.
Right. If memory serves, I think the Theodore Roosevelt account was told to him secondhand. But that does bring up a really good point, Ren, which is that, I mean, people like Ben Radford and the author of this article are asking these questions, and I bet you zero of them have talked to anyone who's actually seen Bigfoot. You know, zero of them have talked to somebody who has literally hunted bear their entire life in the woods and seen a large hairy creature that isn't a bear. Zero of them.
Yeah.
And that's the real problem, is this sort of ivory tower mentality that a lot of these you know, skeptics, that mentality that these skeptics espouse. It's just obnoxious.
Yeah. And I mean, they do interview Lauren Coleman, and he does say something really, I think, prescient in the article, that the problem of like hoaxes and current hoaxes on places like YouTube, you know, there are movies on Netflix about Bigfoot that are obvious hoaxes, and all that does is create articles like this, you know. It further delegitimizes the investigation of something like this. So, yes. I mean, he's right in that. He's right in that regard.
Well, 100%. I mean, yeah. I mean, unless I have somebody say, "Hey, this is a really good video," and then I look at it still with, you know, the side eye. There's just, I don't even bother to look at videos anymore, y'all. It's not gonna show us a dang thing.
Yeah, no. I don't trust any videos or any audio I hear. I mean, you know, you can hear plenty of audio and see videos and stuff on podcasts and on YouTube, but you know, none of that stuff will convince me. I mean, or convince me one way or the other. My evidence comes from the fact that, you know, that at least hundreds of people every year come forward, either having a recent sighting or being like, yeah, I saw one in 1976 or something. You know, like, there are just too many people telling the stories who are seeing it for like literally all of them to be making it up, and for all to be misidentification. It's ridiculous. It's even more so than things like UFOs. I mean, it's like there is so much evidence that people are seeing something that it's almost ridiculous to claim that like it's an obvious hoax or something. It's just like, it doesn't make sense.
There's actually, I believe, a book about this, although the title escapes me. But if you had the same amount of eyewitness testimony and physical evidence presented for Bigfoot's existence, Sasquatch's existence, at a murder trial, it would be open and shut. You know?
Yeah.
You know, audio, and it's not just footprints, folks. It's audio recordings that have, you know, an odd waveform that, you know, audio technicians have been unable to identify. Mm-hmm. I think in some cases it is the hair. I think in some cases it is as humorous as it is to say the scat. You know, I think sometimes it's you know, it's these stories that you read about people's, you know, dogs being found 8 feet up a tree with, you know, their blood you know, covering the limbs of the tree. I mean, there's just so much really compelling evidence, and I think that, you know, ironically, I think it's just people like this just showing their ignorance.
Yeah. Well, that, and they're, you know, they're the ones that the public looks to. So, you know, they're hoping to kind of sway that opinion.
Well, and you know, the other thing is that, like, it also shows the just silly level of engagement that these folks have with it. This binary, is it real or not? Well, if it in order for it to be real, it has to completely conform to everything. People aren't talking about trickster phenomena. They aren't talking about archetypes. They aren't engaging with. And these articles are never written outside the framework of physicalist materialism either. And it just, like I said, it just shows the level of to which they're not engaging with this information and with this evidence, honestly.
Yeah, well, they're taking on a more materialistic, thing. So they don't want to look at all that subtlety.
Yes.
I don't know. There's always people like this too in every generation. I mean, I've just recently been watching the CBS show Strange Angels about Jack Parsons, and there were just a ton of people back then who thought like the idea of us being able to send a rocket into space was just patently ludicrous. Like, and intelligent, like, respected mathematicians and physicists just thought it was just science fiction. It would never come true. Like, it wasn't even possible. So, I mean, people have always been like this. I always just like wonder, like, what happens to these people after these things get proven possible? They just fade into obscurity, or hope everybody forgot all these articles they wrote about it, or.
Well, it's one coffin at a time.
Yeah.
So they're long dead by the time that is proven to be false. What was the name of the Jack Parsons show?
Strange Angels, or Strange Angel, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, it's really
which
good.
Is based on
based
on the book of the same name, which is also very good.
Yeah, I've really been enjoying it. I mean, off topic, but yeah. But it just reminded me, like, every generation has these people. And, honestly, too, like, like this article's so weird that it starts even getting me sort of, like, conspiratorial. Because I'm like, why was this article written? Like, what's the game here? Is it just clickbait? Or, like, is there something else going on?
Yeah, it almost ties into that idea of people wanting to silence people of some sort of establishment trying to silence what is perceived as conspiracy culture. It almost feels that way.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've talked before about my idea that some of this stuff could act like a virus, and even if it's just like the idea that the memes it produces are a virus, and the real conspiracy is that somewhere people don't want this virus to spread because there may be consequences if it spreads too far. And it almost makes you wonder if a lot of this skeptical stuff isn't an effort in that direction.
Well, you also, with the Smithsonian, you also have all the accusations that they've hidden the bones of giants, because they have all these giant bones they've supposedly taken in, and then they just mysteriously disappear.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Smithsonian looks like it's set to prove a certain worldview and sustain that as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough. It's like, if you're familiar at all with the history of the CIA, you know that the CIA was involved in, like, basically propaganda, like, for decades. I mean, going back to its foundation, and it was, propaganda through like weird outlets that people never even really thought, like the Iowa's Writers Workshop, like the whole focus of American literature being grounded in like metaphor and stuff, like the idea that like, American literature should never say things outright, that everything should be told through metaphor and subtlety. Like, that was a project of the CIA. Like, they had people who worked for the CIA who were part of the Iowa's Writers Workshop, and they were that's sort of the most influential MFA program in the country. And it's like, it's so hard to see like what the game is. It's like, why were they so involved in this? Like, why does this matter? Like, what? And that they got to be doing it for some reason, right? They're trying to push public opinion in a certain way to fit some sort of plan for what they want society to be like. And I don't know, I'm getting very conspiratorial here, but like, I mean, when I read stuff like this is the kind of stuff I think, because I'm like, I don't understand, like, who wrote, like, why did someone write this? Like, what? I mean, why do they even care that people believe in Bigfoot,
like I said, I suspect that it's tying into a greater pushback against conspiracy culture because of I'm dancing around politics again. Because it's sort of a pushback against conspiracy culture because conspiracy culture has been perceived lately as being especially dangerous and or violent, and that I don't think that's entirely off base, but at the same time, what does Bigfoot have to? Who's gonna hurt anybody talking about Bigfoot? It just doesn't make any sense. And nobody at me because I'm probably more sympathetic to your views than you think, but I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Ren and I are definitely on the angel demon side of the spectrum here, balancing each other out. We're yin and yanging. We're yin and yanging tonight, guys.
Let's look at the other Bigfoot article, which was in the Daily Grail. Forget collusion with Russia. This U.S. politician is under attack for his Bigfoot porn. Now, the fact that there's Bigfoot porn for the first of all, I know there's also dinosaur porn and other cryptid porn. Wow.
There's a huge market in like Amazon self-published books about like having sex with dinosaurs, and it's a big market.
It's interesting in a way psychologically. And obviously nothing's getting hurt, so if you're into that, that's fine.
Yeah.
But there's a congressman and Riggleman, a retired Air Force intelligence officer, self-publishes in the Bigfoot porn genre on the side, and his opponent made that very public. They say authors can make tens of thousands of dollars a month writing explicit love stories between various women and the mythical Bigfoot.
Oh man, I don't know. There's some weird psychological stuff going on there too.
But clearly, we're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, really.
I know, right? I think I read sometime that a while back that Chuck Tingle, who does a lot of these, these books with titles that I can't say on the air, actually does really well for himself, like six figures well for himself. And what's funny is if you look at his Amazon, I mean, don't do this at work, folks, but if you look at his Amazon page, it's obvious that he's doing it tongue in cheek. Or something in cheek. No, tongue in cheek. He's doing it tongue in cheek because he's talking about paradoxically winning awards and having sex with his awards, and it's just he realizes that he's ridiculous, but people are still eating it up, and I think they just love to laugh at it.
Oh,
that could be
Chuck
too.
Tingle's defense, he was legitimately nominated for a Hugo Award.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, and I don't want to ruin the fun for anyone, but I also don't think Chuck Tingle's actually a real person. I think it's like several people. I think writing it is like a fictional character, but it's fun. It is very silly.
What I find hilarious is how white supremacy has got to be bad when the Bigfoot porn aficionados say don't associate with I'm kidding, but some people have tried to make. I mean, like, look, the other things about in the guy's life are definitely issues that need to be talked about, and they're really reprehensible things. But I've seen a couple of articles of people trying to tie in Bigfoot erotica and his love of it as a symptom of his other political beliefs, and it's like that's a bit of a long bow for me, folks. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's people on both sides of the tracks there that are into weird stuff, so I don't think they have any room to be talking about Bigfoot erotica.
and again, as far as I'm concerned, you can be into whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anyone.
Yeah, you do what thou wilt,
Yeah.
Hold the law. It's just like, it's funny, but I think people should look at maybe his policy platform and like what he's actually campaigning on before, in order to make an informed decision at the polls.
So the next story here is more sad news, and that is that Michael Persinger has passed away at the age of 73. And I was hoping Cheryl Lee would be with us on this one because she actually worked with him doing some of her her some of the experiments that were done with her, he was behind and worked with. But he's most well known for the development of a God helmet. And the God helmet, it stimulated the temporal lobes with electromagnetism, I believe. And what it did is it people who had this on, some of them would say, I feel like there's a presence in the room with me. I'd feel like there's something behind me or something's watching me, and so on and so forth. And this was kind of grabbed by the skeptical community as, well, this explains all paranormal experience. And Persinger never said that. Persinger kept everything as a true skeptic. He never stated that this proved anything it didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he was doing a really good job of that. He did a really good job of that his entire career. And it's that for everyone who wanted to hold this up as a solution, it's this typically narrow-minded perception amongst a lot of people in the skeptical community of mistaking possible vector for cause, and as you said, Persinger never did that, and kudos and hats off to him for actually being what skepticism truly should be.
Yes. Yeah. And I believe there was even, I forget where I saw it, but Dawkins had gone and tried the God helmet on and nothing happened. And Persinger said to him, well, I think it's that some brains aren't wired to have these experiences.
Yeah, I remember Red Pill Junkie often saying that perhaps that was indicative of the fact that some people are God deaf. If you can be tone deaf or colorblind, you can be sort of God deaf. And it wasn't like sometimes the visions, if memory serves, were actually more explicit. Like people actually had visions of spiritual figures, Muhammad, Jesus, the Virgin Mary, even some animistic sort of Native American spirits as well. And there are cases where smells associated with these interactions too.
So, why do we believe Dawkins wasn't just lying to Persinger? Maybe he did see something. He can't say that. It would ruin his career.
that would be the reductionist materialist tack if the tables had been turned, right?
Yeah.
He said he was seeing he said he was seeing something magical. He must have been lying. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, and I agree with you, Josh, there too. It's like it's obvious that the helmet was causing the person wearing it to be in an altered state of consciousness, right? Yeah. Which we all know there are many ways to do that, and they usually open you up to communications with things that aren't part of material reality. And in Persinger's, to his credit, he never made any claims about what was happening. Right. And for a long time, when I was way more materialist, I took this as being like, oh, well, maybe these electromagnetic fields are causing people to hallucinate, and I thought that may explain like UFO stuff. But then you have actual experiences prove that that's not really the case. But you're right. It's inducing an altered state of consciousness, and that is what opens you up to see these things. It's not causing the experience itself,
Right. And I've often wondered if like with UFO studies, you start with a light, and maybe that light is a side effect of some electromagnetic field that is in that area at that point, which then alters your consciousness, and you have an experience connected to that light. But that light is also just a side effect of whatever is affecting you.
It could be, but then the lights sometimes show agency and intelligence. So,
right.
Like how that
and I mean, and going all the way back to something like From Beyond by H.P. Lovecraft, the idea that light actually might stimulate the pineal gland, which we know has at least evidence suggests that there is a link between the pineal gland and perhaps something like DMT as well. So sometimes I wonder if there isn't some sort of objective third-party intelligence or third-party stimulation that's contributing to this. It's interesting. Persinger actually thought or suspected perhaps that this sort of temporal lobe stimulation might actually have been at play in some saints and mystics, which not only gave them their visions, but also in certain saint traditions, especially in the Catholic Church, might have actually caused their body chemistry to have a more distinctive sort of sweet odor about themselves. But again, even when he said that, he was being very careful as to not posit a source, because again, if there's some sort of uh, spiritual or supernatural power that wishes to interact with you, perhaps this is the mechanism by which it does it. Who knows?
And that's the thing. We can't really pin down what any of this stuff is. We can only guess because we don't even understand consciousness. Going back to that first article we had. And without that, everything else is just guesswork.
House of Cards. Not the show, but everything.
It's unfortunate because he did a lot for our understanding of consciousness and altered states. And I had really hoped to have him on. I had written him, but he never got back to me. I'm sure tons of people have written him trying to get them on their podcast. So, but I forget what he had written. He had written something, and I was just blown away by it. And I'm like, okay, I would really like to talk to you. And maybe I should have gone through Cheryl Lee. All right. And here's another debunking one. The Bermuda Triangle mystery solved. Scientists think they've figured it out. And this comes from the Huffington Post. And this is one of those things where, it's hard to say if there really is a Bermuda Triangle. I mean, there's obviously a place of land there that's called the Bermuda Triangle. And, you'll get some people say, well, there's not really more disappearances in any other area, and other people will say there are. So it's kind of like how you want to take that data and look at it. You know what I mean? But they're saying that it's rogue waves that are causing the slightly higher than normal disappearances.
Yeah, and I'll echo Red Pill Junkie's sentiment with that, which was, those 50-foot rogue waves, they can really knock an aircraft out of the air, can't they?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And it's not hard to believe that there are areas on the planet that may have weird electromagnetic stuff going on, and just isn't there a spot where like satellites can't fly over or something?
Oh, never heard of that.
Oh, what am I thinking of? There's a spot
vaguely familiar, but
there's a spot I think in the Pacific. Maybe it's not satellites can't fly. Maybe planes can't fly through it because it's like there's weird electromagnetic stuff going on. Now I can't remember what it is. People can go look it up maybe.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked into Bermuda Triangle stuff since I was like a kid. I haven't even thought about it in forever. But I mean, is there actual data that shows that there are more like plane crashes and ships sunk in that area? Because it seems to me almost sort of like it's just a heavily trafficked area, right? Because and it's just like by statistically there would be more ships and planes that go down there just because it's a really busy corridor. Yeah. I mean, the ocean's really big. I think people realize how big the ocean is, and not a lot of it is like regularly trafficked. So.
Yeah, and I'm coming to this from a pretty agnostic standpoint. I mean, the Bermuda Triangle really isn't my bailiwick, but I've heard very compelling stuff that perhaps the statistics have been fudged to make it appear as if there are more disappearances. When as you said, if you balance it out per capita in terms of how many ships are passing through there, it's not entirely fair to compare that to other parts of the ocean. But I mean, there are some outstanding disappearances that have happened. I mean, I think most famously, Flight 19, which was the disappearance of 5 torpedo bombers that disappeared over the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah,
and that to me is a little bit. I mean, when you're set aside the wave theory, but also, I mean, to have that many aircraft go down with no apparent reason is compelling.
With some weird, radio signals back and forth where they were basically lost in an area they should not have been able to get lost in.
Right.
And then one of the planes that went out searching for them, if I'm not mistaken, also disappeared and was never found.
Trying to remember, because I remember reading about the Flight 19 stuff when I was a kid. I mean, I think one of the things I've heard the explanation that there was like some sort of weather problem that was causing them to not like be able to determine how high in the air they were, and that can be a real problem. I don't think people realize how much you rely on your instruments and your plane to really determine things like your height, and especially like in the ocean. Like if the sky's blue and the ocean's blue and there's fog or cloud, like heavy cloud cover, it can be kind of difficult to know like how high you are up in the air without your altimeter going. And so like I could see somebody crashing because they just didn't know how low they were.
True.
I had heard of, let's see that. Yes, definitely. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, if I remember right, their radio transmissions back, though, they should have been over land, and there was no land to be seen. And that could be, something with their instruments being wrong, but it would have taken all 5 planes to have the same instrument failure.
Yeah, because they do say that their compasses went out for some reason.
Yeah, and that's something you hear about some of the planes and ships that go through there, that there's weird electromagnetic effects. Whether that's really the case or that's an urban myth, hard to say, because there's so much, so many unconfirmed stories about the Bermuda Triangle because people think it's fascinating.
And, out of pure speculation here, but I almost wonder if it's like something like a solar thing, like if there's something going on with the ionosphere in that area that causes more like electromagnetic energy from space to get in over there or something. Because it is odd that their instruments went out. Because these
I think it is compelling, and you've had this study also just completely throws out people who have been through that part of the ocean and said that they've had magnetic anomalies. It's exactly to your point, Ren. I mean, it's not that there are people who don't experience any problems, and then there are people who disappear. There's this middle ground that they're not taking into consideration either.
This problem could be something that's more common in the open ocean than we realize. It may just be that we see it more in this one area because it's more heavily trafficked. Like I guess what I'm not saying that there isn't the possibility that something weird is going on in that area. It just may. The very fact that it's heavily trafficked may skew statistics in a certain way.
Sure,
100%, 100%.
Yeah, it was something I was very interested in as a kid, and then over time it just kind of lost that that interest for me. So did Bigfoot, honestly. I mean, I'm probably more interested in Bigfoot now than I have been in previous years, but. Like those were things I was really into growing up that just kind of fell to the side, and for the most part got replaced by magic and UFOs.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Even though I'm getting more back into them because I think it perhaps says something about where my research and my interests are going to go next. I haven't been into ghost stories in a long time, but because it's I was talking with Adam Satan was hanging out with me a couple days ago, and it's like there are only really like 30 ghost stories, right? And they all get recycled over and over again. Yeah, so but I think that I still think that stuff like Bigfoot stories and ghost stories are really important to this whole ball of wax. Honestly.
Oh, sure, absolutely. And there may be some connection. It may not be that it's all one thing so much as that everything is connected in the way that we perceive it. So whatever's behind ghost phenomena or Bigfoot phenomena or UFO phenomena may have different sources, but it may be using something similar to connect with us.
Right.
I mean, because we simply don't know. Ren, I believe this one came from you. Researchers find source of strange negative gravity. And this came from Live Science.
Yeah, this article is super cool.
Okay, why don't you tell people about it?
So basically, there was a study in which these scientists discovered what apparently looks like a negative mass, and it looks to be generated by sound, with the idea that like they describe sound sort of being made up of particles in the same way that light is made up of like photons. I'm trying to find the name that they used. Can't remember now. But basically they were saying that like, oh, phonons, that's right. So just as light waves can be described as phonons or particles of light, phonons are a way to describe sound waves that emerge from complicated interactions of the fluid molecules involved. But the interesting thing they found out was that in a gravitational field, phonons slowly accelerate in the opposite direction of gravity. So, I mean, this literally means is if you go outside and yell, that sound wave actually starts to slowly curve out into space, right? And what I thought was fascinating about this, there's the whole sort of ancient technology thing you hear a lot of. Oh, the ancients lifted these huge blocks using sound, like the Coral Castle thing.
Right.
This idea that the ancients somehow had a better understanding of like sonic technology that was used to build megalithic structures. I don't know if that's true or not, but this article immediately made me think about that. And I was like, well, I mean, maybe, because I mean, the implication here is that you could use sound possibly if this could be, I guess utilized in some sort of practical manner. I don't think it's too much of a jump to say that you could use sound to counteract gravity. I don't know what the math involved in that is. Like how much sound or like how dense does the sound need to be to have a appreciable effect on like matter, right? Like could you lift a baseball if you had enough sound,
Well, they've used sound to lift small objects at this point in labs.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we know it's possible. But I think whatever, and the reason people think that sound was used by the ancients is because that is in the oral histories that, there was, and there's even supposedly, although I don't think it actually has ever been found, at one point there was supposedly a video of a large block being moved in a Tibetan village up the side of a cliff using drums. But I don't think it's ever actually surfaced. This was something that was stated a long time back, and it just, either it never existed or it just doesn't anymore.
It sort of reminds me a little bit of something. I think maybe Gordon White said this, or maybe he was pulling it from somebody else. But like the idea that modern society, we live in the age of metal, right? Or maybe now we live in the age of plastic. But sort of what we think of as modern civilization is this sort of age of metal, and that the ancients had complete mastery over minerals, over stone, right? Mm-hmm. The Stone Age, but in the most like how technologically advanced you could possibly get, only using stone tools and stone technology. And we know that there are building techniques using stone and using minerals that we still don't understand how they worked or how they were accomplished. And it makes me almost think like, again, this is just super speculation, but did it possibly have something to do with like crystalline structures? Because I'm thinking like, what if you could use rocks and crystals and stuff to basically build like a speaker, right? That when struck or when vibrated would then reverberate on some level enough that it could actually levitate things, and how useful that would be in constructing things. I mean, I hesitate to say that the Egyptians built the pyramids with, sonic, heavy machinery, but it is interesting that this article evokes that sort of old meme and that oral history.
Yeah.
And lit some credence to it.
Thoughts, Josh?
Yeah, you guys are smart. I don't think there's anything that I can add I don't think there's anything else I can add to that. I mean, I think Rin hit all the points that I would too, and I think it's really an interesting study, interesting theory.
All right, Ren, the other one I'm pretty sure you introduced was the aliens rearranging stars idea.
Yeah, this one's cool. It's it's kind of a clickbaity title. It's saying aliens may be rearranging stars to fight dark energy. Dark energy being something that we're not even sure exists.
Compare this to the concept that Bigfoot's crazy, right?
Yeah.
I know the title's clickbaity, but I just love the way that this is this, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, because it totally goes in the other direction. Because it's like we don't have proof of dark energy or aliens, but it's an interesting idea because like what they're saying in it is real. Like, right, like the universe is expanding. Like we can look outside and see that, right? And it does make a point, and this is the point that I've made several times about space travel and the problem of material space travel is that the stars are getting further away from us every second, right? There will eventually reach a point in time where we can no longer travel to any other stars, right? Everything will be spread out, or maybe another galaxy or whatever. Like everything will be spread out so much that you can never hope to ever reach anything else physically. Okay, and the article is about the idea that, like, people have said for a long time, well, if we want to look for signs of extraterrestrial, like highly advanced extraterrestrial civilizations, we'd want to look for things like Dyson spheres being built. I mean, I think that makes a lot of assumptions about what would be important to an extraterrestrial species, or that they would have like a material technology like ours. I think it's very anthropocentric, but it's a cool idea still. I love Dyson spheres. They're cool. And the idea of the article is that in order to basically harness the power, if a society was able to build, or technological civilization was able to build Dyson spheres, they would also probably know that the universe is expanding and that stars are getting further away, and they would want to basically trap as many stars as possible to provide power for the future. Okay, so they would actually be basically capturing stars and moving them closer together, and that we could look for this as maybe an example of an extraterrestrial civilization. And that's true, I guess. I mean, again, that makes a lot of assumptions about what a technologically advanced extraterrestrial civilization would even be like.
Right.
There's actually there's a novel called Bowl of Heaven. I'm trying to remember who wrote it. I know Greg Benson was one of the authors. I think it's like Ben Bova. No, Larry Niven, the Ringworld guy. Yeah, Larry Niven and Greg Benford wrote a novel called Bowl of Heaven that sort of takes place on a star that this is being done to. Because it's kind of a cool idea too. Like, right, if you could build a Dyson sphere, but you could leave part of it open and just let the solar radiation like funnel through that, and you could build like basically a jet engine or a starship out of a star, and use the star as the propulsion system for the ship. And yeah, I mean, that's a cool idea, and sure, let's look for evidence of that. But kind of again, like
it makes a lot of assumptions.
Exactly. Like, I mean, we're assuming that things. I don't know. We have this fixation as humans on this idea that we're going to physically travel to the stars, and that we're going to travel the universe in physical starships, right? Completely ignoring the fact that we already have starships. We already have faster than light communications and faster than light travel. I mean, we can do them in our head. We can do them either through remote viewing or through out-of-body experiences. And I know I've mentioned before on some of my other shows, I think that's possibly a solve for some spirit encounters or extraterrestrial encounters. It's that it's stuff traveling here in a mental form rather than a physical form.
I would say that we don't know for certain that everything is moving away from us. Some of the evidence supports that, but there are high redshift items, particularly I think it's quasars, in front of low redshift objects. And that shouldn't be the case if everything's moving away from us. Also, the fact that, like, for instance, Sirius is moving towards us. So there's a general feel of everything moving away, but there's some stuff that contradicts that. So I don't know that it's really that simple.
I guess you could at least say that the universe is in constant motion, right? Like, things aren't staying where they are right now. And that, I mean, even if the universe even if everything isn't expanding away from us, I do think that there is a real possibility that eventually sometime in the future, things will be so far apart that physical travel, at least in the way we understand physical travel, right? Like, maybe we'll create a FTL warp engine and everything will be all right. But I mean, it depends on whether or not you think the speed of light is a hard limit or not.
Yeah.
And I mean, I tend, I know that I'm more on the the Einstein side of things than you are, Soraya, but I do think that in a material universe, like in terms of our physical matter, I think the speed of light is kind of the speed limit because of the effects of relativity. But I don't think it applies to like mental travel. Like I've traveled in out of body states from Earth to Jupiter in an instant, and if I was traveling at the speed of light, that would take several minutes at least. So like, assuming that I wasn't just hallucinating the whole thing, which is a very real possibility.
Sure.
But I have a strong feeling that like mental travel is pretty much instantaneous and doesn't have any real speed limits on it. But if you're doing things with physical matter, there are limits.
But there may be ways around those limits too. I mean, there may be a way to to basically jump outside that speed limit.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of stuff. There's so much stuff we have no idea about. We couldn't even guess at this point where things are going to go 100 years from now.
Well, that's why we need to figure out how to manufacture the spice melange so we can all get cool blue eyes and fold space.
All right, we got one more story. And this is about the Mayan civilization's collapse. And basically, they've looked at this sediment layer under this lake in Mexico. And for a long time, they've thought that one of the things that caused the ancient Mayans to collapse, because it was a huge civilization. It was absolutely, immense. But it crumbled in just a few hundred years. And one of the theories was, it included deforestation, overpopulation, and extreme drought. But now they're saying that this drought was very extreme, and they're doing it by analyzing the sediment layer under Lake. I wish Red Pill were here. Chichen Canab.
I bet I can.
Yeah, not me.
I'm gonna give it a try. I'm gonna give it a college try.
All right.
Come on, just pull up. What's the name of the art? Here's the lake name.
It's about 3 paragraphs down. 4.
Chicancanab?
Ooh, much better than me.
I think that's right. Red Pill, correct me later.
I'll take it.
On the Yucatan Peninsula, they found a 50% decrease in annual precipitation over more than 100 years, from 800 to 1000 AD. At times, the study shows the decrease was as much as 70%. So that was a massive drought that went on for a very long time. The drought was previously known, but this study was the first to quantify the rainfall, relative humidity, and evaporation at that time. It's also the first to combine multiple element analyses and modeling to determine the climate record during the Mayan civilization demise. So, I mean, that's an entire culture that just basically disappeared. That was huge. It had been there for thousands of years.
Well, I mean, we know the cities
But
were
we're
abandoned.
different.
Yeah. I mean, the cities were abandoned, right? But like,
Right.
but it's not like the people just died when they left the cities.
No, but that's the thing, that whole civilization area stopped.
Yeah.
And some, of course, and then you got some of those cities that the Mayans said they didn't build in the first place.
Yeah, that's true too. I mean, I was recently reading a book called Whisperers by I think it's John Brennan, and it's a book about like spirit interaction with societies. And you see, there's this theory that he has in the book that when civilizations reach like a certain population density in an area, like the spirits stop talking to people, the gods disappear for some reason, like it's too loud or something like that. Because you see this in some other civilizations that collapse very suddenly like this. You see it written in documents from like certain Sumerian kind of things where, they're like, the gods aren't talking to us anymore and the people are leaving the cities. And, well, I don't want to say that that's necessarily what happened here. I sort of wonder what influence this sort of climate change had on their sort of spiritual existence as well. Because I'm sure these
Yeah.
people interacted with spirits or had a priestly class interacted with spirits, and they probably would have been very confused when all of a sudden their spirits didn't bring the rain anymore. And
Yeah.
it didn't bring the rain for 100 years.
Well, it also says that many theories about the drought triggers exist, but there's no smoking gun. Some 1,000 years later, the drought coincides with the beginning of the medieval warm period, thought to have been caused by a decrease in volcanic ash in the atmosphere and an increase in solar activity. Previous studies have shown the Mayans' deforestation may have also contributed. Deforestation tends to decrease the amount of moisture and destabilize the soil. Additional theories for the cause of the drought include changes to atmospheric circulation and a decline in tropical cyclone frequency.
Hmm.
It's and even our culture depends so much on climate.
Yeah.
And we take that for granted because of what we have, but the climate's changing. Whatever the cause may be, whether it be human caused, natural, or probably some combination in between.
Yeah.
The climate is changing, and it's going to change our world.
Yeah. I mean, the ExxonMobil Corporation wouldn't have raised their oil platforms by 30 meters in the 70s if they didn't think that the ocean levels were going to rise.
Yeah.
But
I didn't know they did that.
Yeah. Yeah. People have been preparing for it for a long time. And I think we talked a little bit about this in the last Fringe News show, but I think people know that something's coming and things are changing. But it's one of those things where it's like a death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, it's probably the same way with the Mayans. I mean, everyone didn't just leave the city all at the same time. It's like,
right.
and I think we always look for like a single cause for this kind of thing. And it's like, it could have been the drought, right? It could have been weather problems. They could have had, civil war. They could have had plague happening. I mean, there could have been all different sorts of things. Like, I was listening to a thing about sort of the fall of Rome and talking, like, if you would talk to somebody during the fall of Rome, like, they wouldn't have known that Rome had fallen. Like, it was not something that happened overnight. It was something that took 100 years to fully, like, disintegrate, and that people only could look at it in retrospect and be like, yeah, everything was collapsing. Just for the day-to-day lives of most people, they don't even notice that it's happening all around them.
Right, and the hubris that we are somehow immune from this is just mind-boggling. I think that the old political adage of if you are not angry, you're not paying attention. Well, if you're not terrified, you're not paying attention. I mean, there's so much stuff that, I think that we should be. I'm amazed at how little activity around the Ring of Fire has been getting, with some baseline. So some of these earthquakes averaging out to 6 on the Richter scale, which there's just a lot more activity than there shouldn't have been. It should be rather, and a lot of one of the things that sits along that Ring of Fire is that Yellowstone volcano. That's terrifying. Solar flares, terrifying. The Carrington event style thing, and this is without all the other stuff that we're doing to our world. This is without the self-inflicted problems of setting up, this economy of Band-Aids, just Band-Aid solutions that never get resolved. And it's all, yeah.
Or it's using pesticides on like huge mono-species crops for the last, 50 years, decimating bee populations and completely screwing up our food cycle. I mean,
yeah.
And that's the thing. Like I said, it's always death by 1,000 cuts. Like we never see the apocalypse coming, right? Because it's never that dramatic. Like the apocalypse doesn't happen overnight. The sky doesn't open up and the world collapses overnight. It happens over the course of 100 years or so, and things slowly fall apart. And we're like frogs in a pot that's being slowly heated up to boiling. And people will write books about it 1,000 years from now, talking about how did these people not understand that their civilization was collapsing around them, but you don't see it in the moment.
No. There was something else I was going to say about that. Yeah, the going back to the beginning of this show, when we were flooding last week, I realized, and what we received compared to other parts of the world at times was a minor. thing, you know.
Mhm.
But I'm sitting there watching it rain, and I'm thinking, there's nothing I can do. I can't stop this water. You
Mhm.
know, I went out into my store, and there's 6 inches of water, and I'm like, there's literally nothing I can do about this.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to come in, it's going to do what it's going to do, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. I mean, I walked across my driveway that had become a river that almost pulled me off my feet with the undertow from it. The current was so strong.
Mhm.
And that's, we can't stop that stuff. And that, like I said, that was minor. And even around here, that was minor compared to what some other people went through around here, where they, there was someone I knew who was renting a house down by the lake, and the people in the house, not only did the water start coming in all around, like creating new streams, of water all around the house, but these large boulders started smashing into the back of the house. Luckily, they were rescued because there were a bunch of kids with them. But they now have a whole new ravine where the lawn was.
Mhm.
So nature just kind of is going to do what it's going to do.
We're still a species that's completely at the mercy of our own planet. I mean, and I don't know if that's a problem or not. Like, if we should, I don't know. Like, I mean, that's kind of the first step on the Kardashev scale is the a culture or technology ability to control the weather, control the own forces of the planet, or at least predict it. I mean, I guess there's some people who say that we control the weather, but
Yeah,
And
right.
I'm not entirely certain that that's not, at least in some sense, a reality. In fact, I think it probably is, if memory serves. I mean, there's
maybe.
rudimentary cloud seeding stuff.
Yeah.
Not even bringing into it the Wilhelm Reich sort of
Yeah.
thing as well. So I think that's possible. But in terms of us doing it, yeah, if we do have that technology, we're either not using it or we're using it to the wrong ends.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, there's probably weather modification, but I
Oh,
guess some people believe that there's this big panel that just has like a button that says hurricane on it, and you just press it, and a hurricane pops up over over the ocean. It's like, I don't think it's like that, but yeah, I mean, I can agree that there probably is at
I
least
mean,
attempts at weather modification.
well, and there's I believe that the Emirates uses cloud seeding technology, and they've had pretty good results with having more rainfall in that area. So, but the question really is whether or not they're actually doing it on that's applicable on a massive scale.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think this has been a pretty good Fringe news show, and it made a nice little circle around from my flooding back to my flooding. So I thank you both, and tell people where they can find you. Who wants to go first?
You go ahead, Josh. You're the one with the book.
JoshuaCutchin.com. You can find me here hopefully more often. And new book just came out, Thieves in the Night, which you can find at your favorite online retailer. Or if you want to, I'd encourage this, begging your brick and mortar retailer to order it.
Or get your library to order it.
Yeah.
That works too.
And Ren?
You can find me at liminalroom.com. I'm still on Twitter. I'm taking a hiatus from Twitter, which has been excellent for my mental health and ability to actually get things done. If you'd like to talk to me personally or hang out, I do have a Discord server. You can send me an email. My link to my email is on my Liminal Room blog, or you could just send me a message on Twitter. I'll probably see it at some point. But yeah, definitely buy Josh's book and support Sarai's show.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
I want to thank everyone who supports the show, particularly our Patreons, without which the show would not be anywhere near the quality it is today. But in particular, people pledging $10 or more: Super Inframan, Samantha, Mark Brady, Allison Cook, Craig Cisneros, Donna Beveridge, Sasha Lorg, Christopher Vaughn, Robert Groom, Scott Morris Everett, Chris Elmquist, Russell Wilcoxon, Andy McNamara, Patricia Gayaquinta, John Eddy, Alfred Tuttle, Kevin Schreck, and Carla Mahoney, Riker and Stark, Charles Beauregard, and a huge thanks to Arif Akhtar. Thank you all so very much. All right, as I said at the beginning of the show, there's not been as many shows this month as usual. My goal is generally at least 2 a week, sometimes 3. And I hope to get back to that as in the next couple of weeks. So we will see what goes on as I'm still recovering from the flood we talked about. It's taking up a lot of time to do cleanup and get everything fixed. And I want to throw us extra special thanks out to Allison Cook, who really helped us out, and right when we needed it too. So thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who donated in any way, whether it be their time coming over to help or shooting us some money in donations. It's been incredible, and I appreciate it so much. All right, until next time, thank you for listening. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.